All right, let's go ahead and call our work session to order. Uh, we're going to start with just kind of resetting where we are as a board and as a division. Obviously, we are still in the midst of dealing with the weather, and missed last week's meeting, was postponed to this week because of the weather. So Happy New Year to everyone. But part of what we want to try to do today is really just start off and just do a check-in on where we are operationally as far as the division is concerned, dealing with the weather. Want us to check in on some dates that we have coming up to see where we are as a board in terms of special meetings, mid-year retreats, training, some travel, and some other things. And then we'll just proceed with the rest of the agenda. We know we said we wanted to take some time today to have some further discussion related to the educational planning. Our goal as we left in December is that there may be some items that we want to try to take action on, which would now be next week.
Right.
So I want to make sure we have time and that there's comfort with the board for doing that. And then I know Dr. Boone has handed out some additional work that administration has done associated with the educational planning as a result of the last meeting that we had. We also will touch on some policies that we have before us. Take some time. One of the handouts that you have is really just a year-to-date expenditure for the school board budget. And I just wanted you all to have that because we know we're going to have to work on our school board budget as well as overall budget, getting into that process. Then if there are conversation discussions that we want to start having around priorities as far as the budget is concerned, just want to start getting people prepared for that. And then we'll just follow the agenda from there. So is anything that anyone wants us to touch on that I may have not mentioned already, or anything that you think I may have missed? Well, with that, let's just kind of, Dr. Boone, just kind of talk about where we are. Ms. Wagner's not with us today. She is recuperating from some medical attention that she needed. And I think that other school board members are probably making their way through some of the streets that we're hoping that the slush will finally melt. But we've been out for a week. Been a lot of snow shoveling, a lot of activity. I called Dr. Boone one day last week and just thanked her, because I don't know if you all recall, at one time when we have snow like this, the schools were the last thing that would get touched. And as she came in, they came up with their own system where they have private contractors that are out there now making sure that the schools are ready. So at least when you look at the parking lots and some of the things that were happening, the schools were ready to go, but unfortunately some of the streets and sidewalks weren't. So I just wanted to give Dr. Boone an opportunity to give us an update on where we are and just kind of touching on that first.
Thank you, Mr. Jordan. Good afternoon, Mr. Jordan, members of the school board, and Happy New Year, since we didn't see each other last week. Mr. Jordan has captured it well. We didn't just have a blizzard with snow. It was the accompanying frigid temperatures and dangerous wind chills that have impacted our operations and recovery from that storm. I believe the official snow total for Norfolk was roughly 11 inches, so it was a significant snow event. But not being able to thaw from that, which is what we're used to in this region, that we get cold enough for some snow, enough moisture in the air. Next day the sun comes out, everything shines, and we begin melting. And normally with the storm that happens on Wednesday, Thursday, we should have thawed out Friday, Saturday, been able to be back in school on Monday. But that did not happen at all, and as you know, we're all dealing with the impact of the frigid weather. I want to give a huge word of appreciation to the district's emergency operations team. We actually have a full team that includes academic representatives, operational representatives, school safety and security. We cover everything that impacts school operations. The senior leadership team And so when we sit down to contemplate safe and secure opening of schools and access to schools, we think about students and staff and others. And we also discuss what's the impact on district operations, curriculum and instruction issues. All of that is what we focus on. You'll notice today you won't have some members of the district leadership team or the senior team here. We're in decision-making mode as this meeting starts. So we have some folks out doing some follow-up. But what we were able to put in place was the use of contractors so that once the weather got to a point, we could begin clearing of parking lots. And it has been a huge task, given that the amount of snow and the fact that the snow didn't melt any. So we're really pushing heavy snow. But the contractors, I believe, hit the schools on Friday and have worked through yesterday. I had a little cleanup yesterday, but pretty much worked the entire weekend. We also, in our essential personnel group, had our tradespeople come in, and they set up about 5 or 6 teams of 4 that went to school buildings to support the building supervisors and the custodians there to begin clearing sidewalks, salting, sanding, making sure that when we could open, we'd be ready. And it was also important to do some of that salting and everything so that some of the ice could melt, because the challenge was, as we found in our homes, once you shoveled the top layer of snow, you had the bottom layer of ice. And so we were trying to be proactive as it related to that. So we had crews working the entire weekend and coming in, of course, when it was safe for them to do so. As we know, as the city worked on primary and secondary roads and its facilities, neighborhoods generally aren't part of that work. And as such, our buildings Monday were probably at about 85% readiness, but we needed an additional day to do some more cleanup. Just as we're seeing in our homes, we're now experiencing some issues with thawing, that pipes, we have some leaks and things from broken pipes, some heating challenges that we've been able to restart boilers and do all of that. And so we have a handful of punch list items on some of those that we're working through as we speak. We also have some longer term issues that have emerged as a result of the impact from the storms. I also want to give appreciation to the principals, again, the building supervisors and those custodians who have monitored not only their buildings, but also monitored the neighborhoods around the buildings so that we could have a visual in terms of what was working well and what our challenges are. We've also been a part of the city's emergency operations team, and so daily we've been having a conference call with the city every day, and we've been having our conference calls sometimes 1 to 2 times a day with the emergency operations team we have here with the district. We have in the calendar 6 makeup days, one of which had already expired, which was an October 9th date. We will be, today represents the 5th of our 6 available snow makeup days or weather makeup days, and so the October 9th is gone, so we've used the 5 days that we have. At some point, if we have additional weather issues or concerns to arise, I will be coming back to the board with a recommendation for calendar adjustments if needed. We keep hearing from some members of the staff that looked at the Farmer's Almanac. We still have some heavy precipitation in the future, but I'm calling heavy precipitation rain. Okay. Okay, so we can put our rain boots back on and move on. So we
The
are
eternal optimist.
got to be. So we've had our own teams, and I've ridden around the city over the last several days, and as I said, at some point probably during this meeting, we'll make a final determination as to school status tomorrow. One of the things that the city is helping us with additional communication also is the city had said, you know, there's a requirement to shovel your sidewalks in front of your home following a storm, but didn't want to do the punitive action, the fines and such associated. But we are asking now if they can help us remind folks that any improvement that they can do to their sidewalks will be very beneficial given the number of walkers that we have. So we have the concerns with buses being able to navigate streets. We have the walkers who also have to navigate streets, and snow mounds at intersections and street corners and all of that. The city has spent a great part of today going back now doing some more street widening and taking away some of those mounds at critical corners and intersections. So that's very helpful for us, and that's the value of being part of that team, because we can talk about resource needs and supports. And so when we've identified a few very problematic areas and brought those to the city's attention, they've assisted us with that. So that's where we are. You have my undivided attention, with the exception of a snow call that we have to make in a little while, but I'm waiting for a couple more supports. But thank you all also for the support during this storm. Wasn't what we normally receive in terms of the frigid temperatures with the storm. And the challenge is everything that's melting, we have cold coming again by Sunday. So enjoy the next few days, because we'll get cold. Not like we were before, but we will get back into the 30s with temperatures in the 20s overnight. So it's still winter. So thank you very much.
Questions or anything about where we are, at least as far as the weather update and facility impact?
I just want to tip my hat to Dr. Boone and her team. My many travels around the city, the city should hire you to oversee that, because the schools are far and above better off than other places in the city. So,
yeah. I second that. Yeah.
So
It's that Worcester experience. that
yeah, I was going to say you've had the experience.
So just to move on, because I know Dr. Gabriel's going to have to leave a little early as well. Just wanted to touch in on a couple of dates, and then we can get right into the educational planning. You know, we were supposed to have governance training last week. Sent out an email or tried to text message or something about possibly rescheduling that for February 23rd and 24th. So as of right now, I know we won't be able to have a full contingent on the 24th, but will you all check and let Janelle know, or does anybody know whether or not right now if they can't do the 23rd, if we do one day on the 23rd? Is that?
I haven't.
Oh, yeah, so we're waiting on you for both days?
I definitely can on the 24th.
Okay.
23rd is
You know when you may,
probably by next week, I'll know.
another week? Okay. All right, well, they have,
Would that, let me ask, would that be a Charlottesville or would that be in-house?
we don't
Okay.
know yet, but at least trying to get that one day in since we Saturday.
Okay.
And then the other, we were having a discussion about a three-quarter day board retreat similar to what we did last year in January, where last year we dealt with specialty programs and so forth. We were kind of going back and forth between January the 26th or maybe February the 2nd. And so, Dr. I know with all the changes, do you all have any preference at this point for a date? But I do know we need to get back in.
Well, certainly, we've lost that work that we were doing, you know, expecting to do as to the final agenda for that. But we're holding both the 26th and the 2nd, so.
So if you also can just look at one of those days and see which one works. This would give us an opportunity as a governance team to do our mid-year check-in, look at where we are in terms of specialty programs, academics, you know, many things that the board has brought forward for a semi-annual check-in. Dr. Robinson?
Suggestion, maybe have Janelle make one of those
Calendar entry?
calendar doodles.
Oh, poll.
We'll do it, yeah.
Okay. So if we can get that done, like as soon as possible, especially if we're going to be looking at the 26th. Yes, ma'am.
Is there any opposition to doing it on a Wednesday? We're gonna
I work.
consider a couple of dates.
I'd have to take off work.
I mean, I work on Fridays normally too, so I just.
I work on
wasn't
Fridays
sure.
too.
I work 7 days a week. So, yeah, if you have an alternative date suggestion, we just need it because we had originally were looking at that January 26th or February 2nd date, and that's been out there for a while. But we need to do that so we can do that mid-year work. So, with that, Ms. Basine?
So January 26th is the date, or February 2nd?
Correct. And we'll do a
Okay.
poll on that.
And then, so while we're looking at that week, we also have the Capitol Conference.
Yes.
So I just emailed Ron Jordan to ask him what day he felt we would be better positioned to meet with our local delegation, either the Monday or the Tuesday. The VSBA Capitol Conference content is Monday, right?
Right.
And then they technically say,
And
go
that's
meet with your legislator Tuesday. Although last year, it was more convenient for us to meet with some folks on Monday.
Right.
And today was the first day of the General Assembly, so I'm not sure they know what's up and where we're meeting with whom. So let's see what I hear back, but you make a good point, and I was gonna raise that.
Okay.
As
'Cause
to then, the idea is that as many board members as possible can get up there on the day to go meet with legislators to talk about some of our priorities.
It's interesting because in the paper, they recommended that large groups of people don't show up.
I know,
Because
that's
of,
the
because
other,
the building has been changed.
I've seen that and read that as well, exactly.
So as of right now, I mean, I don't know how many are scheduled to be at the conference itself, but you're correct. That would be
2 in the same week.
Yeah,
That
just because
Monday
we're gonna have to work
afternoon.
schedules, our work and other schedules, I just think be cognizant of that potential that week, yeah.
But for us, trying to have all 7, if we can, at our meeting is
Yeah.
the key.
Is the key.
Is
right.
the key. And we know whether we are going back and forth to Richmond on the 22nd, 23rd, or any other day that folks want to go back and forth, we can, we can do
Figure
that.
out.
So let's come back to the end on any additional calendar things, 'cause I want to make sure that we can begin to get into discussions related to the educational planning. So with that, you have, I think Dr. Boone, I may have one of those copies. You have at your desk, we had asked for some larger maps.
Yeah, just take that one, I'll get another one.
Okay. Larger maps where we could see some street names. We also, at the end of the last meeting, gave some feedback on some options that the division has here. And then as of right now, we also would be discussing and being prepared to act on at least the St. Helena recommendation next week. So why don't we just start with the St. Helena piece? Is there any further questions or discussions that anyone would like to have regarding St. Helena graduates transitioning to Blair Middle School?
If, I
Oh,
was
oh,
gonna
sure,
say,
please.
just gonna add a couple of points, again, taken away from the conversations that we had at the last meeting. Again, what's accomplished through this changing that pathway from middle and high school for St. Helena is that Maury is closer to that neighborhood than Lake Taylor's catchment area. Gives us some better enrollment balancing at the high schools. And it helps with some of the diversity goals that the board has put in place. So just wanted to share that again as to how we got to that. And again, the overarching piece was how do we balance particularly some of our middle school excess capacity.
Gabriel?
Dr. Boone, do you anticipate that there were a couple of comments about needing some extra security or staffing? Do you anticipate an increase in any of the staffing for Blair with the arrival of some of the students?
We will. That's a loaded question. So let me. Okay. So we will certainly staff the school appropriately with the number of students that are enrolled. We're talking roughly, as we talk about the fifth grade class on average is about 50 students. So if you have students who also access some of our other middle school specialty programs, we may be talking about 35, 40 students who will be at the school. So certainly, the class sizes, the academy sizes will be adjusted for that. I know in listening to comments at the public hearing on this, certainly I have done some research on what happened when Lafayette Winona was closed. This is a very different scenario. And my commitment, as it is to all schools, is that we have a full system of supports that are there to support all students' needs, not just those who are arriving. And I also don't and won't subscribe to the fact that students from St. Helena would create some new undue burden on Blair or Maury with their presence. And so because of that, absolutely, we will treat that as we do staffing, as when we always look at staffing, what's needed based on the total enrollment, not where the enrollment comes from.
Needs of all the students.
Yes.
And I think it would be fair to say that all of this that we're discussing is being tied to the budget and the ongoing conversation that we know we need to have. So to me, it's not just a matter of what type of supports may be needed in any individual school, but as we are embarking upon specialty programs or whatever it is that we end up calling them at academies or school-wide programs, we know that there are going to be additional resources that we're going to have to discuss and have conversations both internally and with the city and with the private sector if any of these things are going to go forward. So right now, we're just at the stage of what would it look like, and then we're going to have to quickly delve into what are the resources, be they financial or human, that are going to be needed to support this new work, as well as we know we have outstanding needs that we've talked about for some time. So for me, I'm not looking at it in terms of just one particular school, but we know that any of these things that we're going to have to do are going to require, the division as a whole is underfunded. So that has not changed. So anything that we add to it is just going to be an additional supports that we know we're going to have to find ways of providing what our children need and what our staff need for the excellence that we say we want to have. Anything else on at this point as far as the St. Helena option is concerned? So we'll still have opportunity at during the discussion period and during the activity for at the next meeting. But if you have any additional questions or concerns, if you can please get those in so that we can try to get any questions that you have related to the St. Helena pathway addressed, and we can get it out to all of the board, especially since we're missing two members today. Ms. Basine?
My only question or comment is, we had the public hearing at St. Helena, but have we also done additional outreach to, with the PTAs of the schools that would be affected, like Blair and Maury, and just to kind of let them, I'm just curious, because that's a question I've been asked by community members, so that's.
No, we haven't done any outreach to those schools. The PTA was represented at the public hearing, so we received those comments as we did others.
Right.
Yeah, and I may have mentioned it the last meeting. I know from the Blair PTA, they had reached out. I was going to go meet with them, but they had a holiday program. With the schools being shut, I'm not sure what the current schedule is, but I hope we are still making ourselves available and accessible to members of the public that have any questions or concerns. So right now, if you think about it, since we've had our last meeting, it's been a day and a half of school.
It's been like 23 days of no school. I'm not counting.
Not that you're counting, Mom.
Not that I'm counting.
Any other questions then on
Children still alive.
as far as St. Helena is concerned? Okay. All right, so Dr. Boone, would you like to share with us what we have before us with the
Yes.
charts that you provided us?
And Mr. Foote is here also to lend support on, as if we need it, as we discussed. When we were looking at the maps last time, a couple of board members mentioned it would be very helpful to be able to see streets that are directly impacted by proposed boundary changes. What you have here are all of the options that we presented as preliminary recommendations to the board for the Lake Taylor High School CTE school, comprehensive CTE school. We know that the board, in its deliberations, asked us to begin to look at a hybrid of number 2 and 3. That's a combination of a program feeder and a dedicated boundary within the Lake Taylor zone. So what you have before you are all of those preliminary recommendations, but in large, and we work with cooperative strategies to put street names in. You know, we're not 100% all street names here, but you get the major streets that are impacted by the drawings and the various options. So this is what we're providing to you today for again, to help answer some questions that you may have. We also are working on the request, again, the weather has really thrown us back, in terms of the demographic information that parallels each of these maps. So we wanted to make sure, because those were specific requests that the board had also last time, in terms of, you know, what's the impact on schools in each of these options, so the other high schools. So I wanted to at least share this portion. We have some of the demographic data on the original maps and information that was provided. That goes all the way back to the November 1st meeting. So you have that demographic data didn't change, but you asked for some more specific data, and that's what we're working to compilate.
Ms. Doyle?
Question, is the hybrid of 2 and 3 really number 5 here, which is option 4, Matt?
That's the programmatic feeder.
You said option
Yeah,
5?
Father says the
Programmatic and geo-boundary,
Graphic boundary goes with number 4,
which is what the hybrid of 2 and 3 was.
with some more tweaking.
Okay.
Yes.
That's option 4.
Yes.
Could I also point out that you will notice that there are some areas of the city that are cropped.
Yeah.
Not everything's there. What Long did was to focus in on the zones and the zones where they match up together in the central part of the city, and therefore he cut those areas out so that we were able to print this on 11 by 17 paper. If he did not have done that, we could not have printed. It would have been too small.
Compare it to.
So you notice that it is cropped
Right.
on the east and west portions of the map.
So built into this, are there, how do we kind of follow what exists today versus what a change would be? Is there some way to see that on the map, or is there some other additional description, or?
In the, I'm trying to pull up the early report, because in the report from November 1st, let me pull that up,
They had the pathways in it?
that had, give me just a second to pull down some of the pages.
Did you say November the 1st?
November 1st. So what you're asking for, I think, Mr. Jordan, is an overlay of what's current Lake Taylor High School boundary. Is that, because that's the only thing that's missing from here. You would, the other high school boundaries too. I think Ms. Basine is pulling up those maps.
Yeah,
Those
these
are
don't
the-
have the streets on them, but
Right,
they,
and that's
yeah.
what we're enlarging. It has some description there.
Right, but in the, maybe I'm at the middle school then. In the report that we received, right now it's under board docs under that November 1 presentation. There's the, some of the high-level demographic data that you spoke to that tends to be on the right, socioeconomic and utilization metrics. And then there's some feeder patterns. So when we were at the last meeting, I know Dr. Robinson was pointing out that I think embedded in, I don't know if it's in the Lake Taylor options or overall, that there was some middle school cleanups.
Right. That's not any of this.
Okay,
This is
all right.
specific to the comprehensive CTE high school.
Okay.
One of the pieces, again, that in being out, that we haven't been able to pull together, to show you graphically, or either by a list of streets, where the neighborhoods that had students attending the same elementary school and different middle schools, what neighborhoods are those and what are those streets? And that we will bring back to you.
Okay, so then these are simply blown-up maps of the existing CT options plus this option 4 that is evolving.
Which was one of the option 4, right.
You're right. It's not the hybrid. That option 4 is
It's leaning toward it. It brings out some of that. That's why I said we got to pull from
It's the fourth
2 or
option.
3
the fourth option.
different maps to answer and be responsive to some of the questions and comments that you raised at the last meeting.
The geographic and
So the
programmatic.
presentation, if I'm not mistaken, which you're referring to this page, 1, 2,
Yes.
3, 4,
Yeah.
does not equal these numbers.
Right.
So number 2 and 3 is the hybrid we proposed, which is represented in option 4 here. This is the hybrid of 2 and 3.
But not totally, it's a beginning of what you asked for, but not totally there because of some more work we have to do with that.
Right.
that was the, if my recollection's correct, option 4 was a combination of both
Geographic. and-
geographic and programmatic.
Right, and that's, and when I said it, the discussion last time was so much on numbers 2 and 3.
Yeah.
That the way I'd stated it was that we're looking at a combination, a hybrid of 2 and 3, which gets us closer to 4, but not exactly based on some of the other comments that we noted at the last meeting.
Okay. But I would be interested to see the feeder patterns as they're laid out for the elementary schools and middle schools.
Yes, we will bring that to you. Again, the idea is that we had streets that were divided, students who went to the same elementary school, but then that street itself divided, and they didn't necessarily go to the same middle school. So that's the kind of work that we were doing, just to, as we call it, the cleanup work, so that they are true pathways.
Okay.
So, oh,
So what's the timing on knowing what the options are for Lake Taylor boundaries, so that we can actually vote on a recommendation to move forward?
As we indicated to the board, we'll be bringing work back to you now through February with the goal of a vote in February so that we could begin the additional marketing and scheduling. So that was our commitment at the December meeting.
So then we're looking at the February business meeting right now as that likely,
As that decision point.
so that's February 21st.
Yes.
And then we have our work session on the 7th. And this goes back to the importance of trying to have that
Mini
that
retreat.
mini retreat. But just for my refresher, can we just talk through these again real quick? So on the 5 charts, we have no boundary, option 1A. Can you just re-describe what the
Yeah, so let me.
one boundary, option 1A is?
I'll go back to what we initially presented. 1A was pretty much the boundary that we would not have any associated attendance zone with Lake Taylor High School. That 100% of the high school population would be zoned to the 4 remaining high schools. And then the draw into Lake Taylor High School would come from each of those 4 schools, those remaining 4 schools. So that was the essence of no boundary. That also serves to oversubscribe the capacity at nearly all 4 of the remaining high schools. Boundary 2 was pure limited, option 2,
What was 1B then?
Yeah, that's what, yeah, on this sheet,
1B.
it's 1A and 1B.
1B just matches the map, so, let me
It's
go
a
back.
different way of looking at the option that there's no zone. So-
No boundary, okay.
Right, there's no boundary, but there are a little bit of differences to give you some flavor of what some of the options would be when you look at.
Okay, so the
boundary.
no boundary, there are two okay, so I hear what
No
Dennis is
boundaries.
saying.
Yeah.
There are two no boundary options in these maps that we presented today. The purpose of those is that there were different options that if we did not go with, that if we adopted a no boundary model, there were a couple of recommendations, couple of options the board could consider to configure the attendance boundaries for the 4 high schools. So that's 1A and 1B.
Okay, so can I?
Be a full
so-
realignment.
Yeah. So,
That's going to happen if there's no boundary.
Right,
That's correct.
exactly.
so what are the differences?
It's
Right down
Can
the
you-
bottom.
the bottom.
Down the bottom of it. Berkeley. It's Berkeley.
One,
Oh,
1A has
Look at the two look
all
at the
the
two
south
maps.
side light blue. And
Oh, okay, yep.
Yeah, I was good on that on the
has,
SOLs. I was good on that. Right?
Half the south side is light blue, it's like.
I believe the difference is that the
Yeah.
Southside
Some of
STEM
them gotta go to
Academy,
Maury.
I'm sorry. I believe the difference is that the one is the Southside STEM Academy is assigned to Maury versus the other one is assigned to Booker T. Washington. So,
Again, these are purely options, don't need anybody falling off the rail. These are options to consider. This is the messy work that we do when we're dealing with boundaries, and so this is what we're bringing forward.
But the bottom line is, with no boundary, all other schools are oversubscribed, and that's assuming that CTE gets a full onboarding of 300 students while graduating the Lake Taylors that are already there.
That's right, so we would be needing to draw
Exactly.
roughly 1,200 students over time out of the other 4 high schools in order to balance attendance. Okay. Option 2 was the limited geographic boundary for certain students who currently attend Lake Taylor Middle School would continue attending Lake Taylor High School. That too would increase the utilization of the other 4 high schools. But there were some options around 1/3 of the class, if with the limited geographic boundary, 1/3 of the class, 9th grade would be from Lake Taylor Middle School, the existing middle school boundary. And then 2/3 would be slots drawn from across the city. So that was the way in which you think about the limited geographic boundary, option 2.
Now, if a family did not want to send their child to the CTE school, would they have the option of opting for a different program?
Those are the questions, we would say absolutely yes, but that's why the board helping us zero in on which options to fully develop, those are the types of questions then we can anticipate and bring into a recommended option. So that's why last discussion was so valuable in that hybrid between 2 and 3. So what does that look like? But absolutely, because we do have high school options, choice, district-wide choice for our high school specialty programs, that would still be available. And even if it wasn't about a specialty program, that's a decision we would have to make.
Right. I can't imagine a parent not wanting their child in a high-functioning program like we're planning there, but
But again, unless they had had their mindset for the IB program or the medical specialty, so it could be things that,
They could apply
right,
somewhere.
that are attractive for other reasons. Okay, option 3 is the programmatic feeder option. And this is where students from the Southside STEM Academy, by virtue of its programming and being the STEM-focused school, would be zoned to attend Lake Taylor High School if they wanted to continue in the STEM CTE pathway. So students who, so this pushes then not having a true middle school boundary other than those that are coming from the Southside STEM. So that would be the difference. And so that's what continues to push on enrollment in the 4 high schools. Because, again, we'll have, after next year, we'll have roughly 300 students currently still enrolled at Lake Taylor Middle School once, potentially, once Southside STEM becomes K-8. So it reaches its last year.
300 in the 8th grade, you mean, or
300 total,
total?
right?
Okay.
Because we haven't drawn any new boundaries, so
Right.
we're just pulling down on what the enrollment looks like.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Of course, in these, we're having to take care of current Lake Taylor High School students so that they, you know, if you've already been there, those would be students who next year would be grades 10 through 12, would have some options in terms of staying. So that's a part of the population. Approximately 1/4 of the Southside STEM Academy would represent the 9th grade class. And then 3/4 of the rest of the 9th grade class would be application and drawing from around the city. And so this one and the geographic boundary were the ones we got to some rich conversation on last time, and what you all asked us to do some more development work on. The fourth deals with the combined geographic and programmatic feeder. And what makes this different from the conversation we had last time, this identifies Lake Taylor Middle School and Southside STEM Academy as representing the geographic boundary. Our notes indicate we wanted to look at that more richly and see and come back to what's that recommendation we would have for who the middle school student, if we do a programmatic piece, would it be limited to that? What would it look like? Because we also went into the Booker T. STEAM conversation in conjunction with this conversation. So this is what we're trying to factor in. Again, current Lake Taylor High School students would continue to attend, and that would make roughly half of the slots available to students from across the city. So that's the way in which the options materialize. But what makes option 4 different from the discussion is the fact that the option 4 defined the boundaries so far, and you've asked us to go back and look and think some more about what the geographic boundary would look like for Lake Taylor High School in the programmatic piece, geographic, and which programs would feed into it.
What number constitute half available slots as choice under option 4?
We were using roughly 1,200 pupil school
Right.
initially. And so if you think about 3 grade levels that are continuing, we're looking at a 9th grade class of roughly 300 students. And so half of that would be essentially 150.
Okay.
But that's where we're looking to have 300 students per grade level when the school is fully operational to get to that 1,200.
Is that a normal progression? Because don't you usually start out with a larger cohort, 9th grade, and it dwindles down a bit? Or is it-
Sometimes it does, but with specialty schools, we don't necessarily see it going in that progression. You see some attrition, but not huge numbers. And
Okay.
we have some flexibility because, again, just because students could stay at Lake Taylor High School who currently attend doesn't mean that they would choose to do so. So that would open up some potential for spaces too.
Would that be the only, well, I guess that'd have to be ferreted out once we decide the program, if there would be other entry points other than 9th grade.
Generally, in the comprehensive CTE schools, and I see Ms. Goshen is here, generally, that's a 9th grade entry point. With the goal, because of the comprehensive nature.
Okay.
Certainly, we can begin to look at that. You know, we said, once the board adopts the model that we'll be using to populate and start the comprehensive CTE school, we will then phase out 9th graders from the other 4 high schools being able to enroll at NTC, at Norfolk Technical. So that also begins that push into how would I get to NTC through the comprehensive
Okay.
CTE school. So that's also one of those drivers. We also have to do that to manage costs. What will happen with the CTE school is the value and of the academic and career tech folks meshing as one faculty, not career tech ed and academics separately. It's what they will build around the academics that are necessary for careers and for the world of work and what's relevant for what will happen here. And so that's why it's important for students to get in and what that looks like. So we will be phasing out the CTE at the other high schools that go to NTC. We will still have strong CTE programming at the other high schools. We aren't removing or reducing any of those programs, but most of those are programs that don't require the heavy manufacturing labs and some of the other specializations. So we have business and other CTE programs that are currently happening at our 4 high schools. Those would continue.
Arturo?
Oh, I have a question when it comes to how the board intends to do outreach to the middle schools and things, because although CTE is becoming like a very essential thing and a lot for kids that are growing up, however, a lot of them still maintain this emphasis on going to either like IB school or medical programs. How does the board intend to really draw and influence those students to take advantage of this new opportunity that's being available at the CTE schools?
We have started that publicizing, and Ms. Goshen or Mr. Coleman, if you all want to add, please feel free to do so. One of the things we do is with the middle school outreach in general, you know, we've already had programming where you can see what are the specialty programs that are available at the high schools and what are those interests. We're also working with the Greater Norfolk Corporation on developing a very strong marketing strategy. Dr. LeGrand, Ms. Goshen, and others are working with some volunteers from the business community that are helping us also map and to be able to strategically talk about what goes there. We will certainly do a full push to all 8th graders. Mm-hmm. We know that this is going to be outside of the timing for our common application for high school specialty programs. We will have a special opportunity for this entering 9th grade class. So this first year, we're going to have to navigate and be very intentional and do a very strong push on this. And then it will be in that cycle following that.
Oh, and also when it comes to involvement with, because I know a lot of students that I interact with are participating in things like the Virginia Technical Center, and so would the CTE school at Lake Taylor now be like in association with that, or is it still going to maintain like a separate boundary, or will the board want to push more its influence about the CTE school rather than VOTech?
And actually, because I was going to ask if maybe we can pause and do like a mini commercial, because there's been a lot of questions that have come up about just kind of refreshing the board what the comprehensive CTE school is, the academies that we've been working on. So I don't know if we can do maybe just a
Ms.
like
Goshen?
a mini refresher on that.
She can articulate it much better than I can, but what the 4 academies are. But let me say to you, Arturo, our goal is to have the CTE strengthen, the comprehensive CTE high schools, strengthen the presence of CTE in our schools, and that's why we aren't removing anything from the 4 existing high schools that's already there. This is about the students who've accessed the Norfolk Technical Center over time. So I'll ask Ms. Goshen to do the mini commercial.
Good afternoon to everyone. The comprehensive CTE high school is just that. It's a merging of or a seamless marriage between high academics and high relevant and rigorous career and technical education. You're looking at 4 different academies. One is the application being made for a Governor's STEM Academy, where you have your high-end engineering, design, and things of that nature. You also have an application being made for a Governor's Health Medical Sciences Academy, not to replace the EVMS program. It's in addition to. Right now, you have many of the students from Maury who come over to the Technical Center to take the nursing, dental, and things of that nature. Then you have your regional trades and industrial, where you have your mechatronics, advanced trades and industrial, and then you have your information technology, where there's computer science, your cybersecurity. Those things are a part of what's being done at Norfolk Technical Center now with an expansion. And so Norfolk Technical Center will be rolled into the comprehensive high school. So students who would have taken a program there at Norfolk Technical Center, they're only 11th and 12th grade. So in essence, you have to wait to the 11th grade to access that. Now that's no longer an issue. It's open to 9th graders. The 9th graders have a wonderful opportunity because it's similar to college. You come in the 9th grade and you decide on a major. Well, this time you don't decide right then. You have an opportunity to rotate and experience all 4 of the academies before you decide rising in the 10th grade as to which one you would like to do. It's not an either or, either you do career and technical or you do academics. Your high academics include advanced placement. There is an IB strand for career and technical education now. You have dual enrollment. You name it, the courses will be virtual. Students will have opportunities for apprenticeships and things of that nature. So they always joke and say it's not your grandfather's vocational program. Truly, it is not. It's something far beyond what we currently see, and it's going to be an exciting venture for all students because it does not allow only certain students. It's open to everyone. If you look at our career and technical education today, we span all different populations and subgroups. We may have students with disabilities, gifted education students, students who are in various different programs. The good thing is we also remember it's comprehensive, so no student will have to give up any of the athletics or the programs and things that they have in the past. When you talk about marrying two different programs, your teachers, in terms of core content, work closely with career and technical education teachers. So students are not getting on the bus every other day to access either or. You have the two wonderful programming going on each and every day.
Ms. Doyle?
Will all 4 programs be stood up next year at the launch of the CTE at Lake Taylor?
No, that is not possible because you have an application process. So we have an application process to go through for the governor's health and medical sciences. We have to apply and then go before the state board for that. You also have an application process for STEM. And so what the one that is most intact right now and more likely to be ready sooner than later would be the IT Academy, with the other ones coming right behind it.
How soon is coming right behind it mean?
You have to go through an application process. For example, 6 months prior to going before the board, you have to apply. Then you go before the state board, you present, and then you be accepted. And so we have various committees now working on different things. There's a group who has come together in November and December to look at the components needed for the Health Medical Sciences Governor's Academy. And then we have a group coming together. For unfortunately, we had the snow, who will reconvene to do the governor's STEM. And I want everyone to make sure we understand it's very different than a governor's school. This is an academy versus a governor's school. You do not need the application for the other two, the IT Academy. What you do have to apply for is the courses that you will be on board. In order for us to bring those on board, we enlisted the responses and the feedback from students. So we are surveying current Norfolk Public School students, mostly middle school, because if you think about it, in a couple of years, they will be those who populate it. You survey them for the interest in the courses in which they'd like to take. For example, cybersecurity. We do not currently offer that. In order to do so, we have to apply to the state. So we are now surveying middle school students and 9th graders to see their level of interest in order to move up.
So will the second year of the CTE have all 4 academies in place by the time we apply?
I can't speak to that because I need to make sure I don't make promises that I cannot fulfill, and I'm not saying it's all of us. We are working to ensure that all things are in place, but again, when you have 2 that are application-based in terms of the state, we're working on someone else's timeline, but the committees are already together. They are already working to see what is needed in order for that to happen.
And I think the other thing not to lose in this conversation is that the work in those academies will continue. We don't lose the programming while we wait for the label that says it is a governor's academy. So if that's the work, the career focus that you're interested in, you still have an opportunity to begin that matriculation to that. It's the identification as the governor's standard for that type of academy that will follow.
Ms. Basine?
I'm trying to think of the right terminology. I know we have the CTE committee, but the CTE, the advisory board for this school, we've talked about that before, but are we ready to begin the appointment process for that? Will that help in the application?
So that's another step, and I've had conversations back just before the break with Barry Bishop. That's part of the commitment that a prior board made in terms of the governance model for that particular school. So yes, we will be coming back to you all very shortly in terms of that governance model. But at this point, we needed to be able to get the infrastructure going so we could get our marketing ready to go. The governance piece, we will bring back to the board, what recommendations and information on that structure, but that's exactly what we're gonna be working on.
Okay, but that doesn't hold up the application process for the other, for the academies, so the
No, it
current
will not.
committees are working on that?
Yes, the current committees will provide us the opportunity to move forward with the instructional aspect.
Okay.
The governance model in which you are referencing has a lot to do with the operational side of it.
And just for clarity, because I know, just from questions I know I've received, can you just kind of talk a little bit more about the types of individuals at the table, private sector individuals within the school division who are working on the academies for the comprehensive school, and then you have existing CTAC, I guess that's what we call it. Can you just kind of talk about the committees? 'Cause I think sometimes people are getting confused around the different
The
advisory
differences.
committees and working committees that you have.
We are very fortunate to have a wealth of individuals who are willing to come to the table to continue to move our students forward. We have a CTE advisory committee that's about a 10 to 12 member committee who takes a look at the entire division in terms of CTE, remembering that the CTE high school will not replace what's going on at the other high schools as well as the middle schools. So we have a group who's keeping a finger on the pulse of growing the entire division. And then that group breaks into subcommittees that will allow individuals with select specialties to focus on different areas. For example, a subcommittee focusing on health and medical sciences. You may have individuals from healthcare, you have individuals from higher education, from the business industry will come together to look at various courses that are needed in various industries that will help move our students forward. They're helping us to take a look at what's currently offered and to build forward. Another example of that was in November when we brought together about 12 different businesses to help work on the IT Academy. Individuals from various different areas who came together to look at our information technology courses and really speak to us about what's needed for students in the future, taking us beyond our current expertise. We don't only have industry individuals, we have teachers, parents, students, as well as higher education and some individuals from the state level who come in to work with us to ensure that if we're moving forward in the right direction for the right reason for all students. So while we have subcommittees working on the CTE high school in the future, we have a wonderful body of individuals who will continue to push and move us forward and make recommendations for our current CTE program that encompasses K-8s, middle schools, and high schools.
Questions?
Oh, I have a question.
Dr.
Also, when it comes to the whole CTE program, since there's going to be more of a specialization when it comes to the academies, are the students going to have the opportunity to access like certifications in that specific field to kind of have like an edge just in case that if they wish not to like pursue like a college education, they still have that certification that allows them to go into a field of work immediately after graduating from the CTE program? Is that something that's already under discussion? Is that something that like the committee is like willing to consider in its development of the program?
Currently, all of our programs that are in place offer credentials, not only because it's a graduation requirement for the standard diploma, but we started long before that. And so each program that a student currently is enrolled, you have an opportunity to do a credential. For example, if they're in the nursing program, they are able to take the NCLEX, the National Nursing for Practical Nursing. If they're in cosmetology, engineering, dental, you name it, each program has an opportunity for students to earn a credential at the end of their programming. Some of the programs are 2-year, they'll get a credential, the opportunity to earn a credential after that, or a 1-year program, and that will continue. So once we open the Career and Technical Education High School, that will not cease at the other high schools. Students will continue to exceed in their program of interest.
Dr. Gabriel?
At some point, do you think you might be able to provide the board, and this could be as a part of the mini retreat if we wanted to, the process for the governor school application, because there might be some confusion about, because in the past we've heard about governor school and then magnet school and then, academy, and just so that we're clear on what that application is that we're going for, and you said it's more operational versus program, but just so that we know that process and what's required of us and what that's going to elevate the program to once we get that credentialing.
Right.
Absolutely.
One of the things, again, unplanned commercial, but obviously you can see we're doing the work because we can talk about it fluidly. But that's one of the things Mr. Jordan and I have talked about as we've looked at, and even in the last agenda planning that we had, when we come back and provide an update of where we are and what that vision still looks like for the CTE school and how it's evolving.
Anything else for Ms. Goshen? Thank you for the
Thank you.
impromptu.
Ms. Goshen.
Thank you.
So further discussion in general on where we are. We know that we don't have all of the demographic info, but we know that has to come back. We've talked about, even in general with some of the scenarios, trying to make sure that the alignment with some of our overarching goals also fit in with the different options that we have. At the end, it was kind of mentioned a moment ago about the concept of the cybersecurity, the STEAM at Booker T with a cybersecurity emphasis. I will share that, was it the day?
The 22nd.
Yeah, I think it was the Friday. Dr. Boone and I had a meeting with provost over at Norfolk State. They were closed. Everybody was willing to come in, and we just talked about the potential for what a potential collaboration could look like. So they were very open to that, and so there's communication that is now underway between the administration here and with leadership at Norfolk State. So they were very excited. Even talked about what was it, cyber psychology,
Yes.
I believe it was, that is also being pursued. So we know it's a lot of things there, but these opportunities and these collaborations and these channels of communications are opening. And so, we're going to have a very good thing once we decide what it is that we're going to do.
You're working on that.
Ms. Basine?
Well, so what I feel like I need next, to be really comfortable with this is that demographic piece. What it would look like to have, right now, just thinking about it, if my concern, if we were to do a hybrid or full geographic and programmatic, is that it could potentially not be meeting our diversity goals. So I think we have to be intentional from the start about being socioeconomically diverse. Otherwise, we may lose that down the road.
I don't disagree. And here's that fine line between set-asides that aren't necessarily defensible in educational programming and allowing the law of natural attraction happen to the programs. I think the way in which we address the issues of making sure that the school meets the diversity goals that the board has, particularly socioeconomically, gets back to the earlier question that Arturo asked. What's going to be our outreach? How are we going to market and talk with students and parents around the possibilities of the schools so that they will be in that queue for the applications. That's the work that will get us to those diversity goals.
Yeah.
I mean, very clearly, a district that's almost 70% free and reduced lunch, that means 2/3 of our students
Right.
are eligible.
Or more.
So that's the law of a natural attraction. We could have 2/3 of our students being there who are eligible for free and reduced price lunch. So here's that other fine line, well, do you tell somebody they can't go because now we've hit our free and reduced lunch target? We aren't gonna do it that way, but that's ways in which we are processing how we evaluate what goes on.
Processing through my head.
Right.
Y'all hit me with loaded ones
Yeah.
No,
today,
we
but
not,
I'm
no.
ready.
It's the same thing we've talked about
I'm ready.
for some time, but
But that's, those are all, right on, but making sure, because of the law of attraction, I mean, I think with the commercial we just received, and I know with outstanding marketing we're gonna do, we could have, a huge interest in this. And if we have the geographic plus the programmatic, it obviously limits the number of open enrollment seats, so.
But again, do think about the programmatic is work that we've done to get ready for this.
Right.
Programmatic is not that we're taking seats away from open enrollment. We have made a conscious decision as a district to have some designated elementary and middle school options. And so those should become some of our natural feeders. And at least one of those is not a district-wide choice. It is a school that has that programming based on its attendance boundaries, it being the Southside STEM Academy. So I think we're gonna see a lot of things get into the mix that will make it work. But I just caution us to say if we have a programmatic feeder, it looks as though we're clipping somebody else
Yeah.
out of it, because we've been intentional to build a feeder for this school, whether or not it's part of the actual attendance zone or whether children and families self-select to go there. So that's the difference in the language, I think, on
Yeah,
that.
yeah, you're right about that, yeah.
I'm gonna come back, Dr. Robertson.
To address Arturo's initial question is how do we get down to the middle schools? If I just, from a historical perspective, that was one of the concepts within the whole CTE program. It just wasn't the high school, but we was going to push down into the middle schools to create the excitement, the foundation, and even going even to the elementary schools, so that there's a natural progression of children starting out with the idea that they have this program available to them when they get to high school. So it's not something they'll decide in 8th grade. They're going to be exposed to it, hopefully from pre-K all the way through.
I just wanted to mention on the conversation that was just taking place with the demographics. I hadn't really, I had thought about it, but it's like you all were having a conversation around what would the enrollment of the new school be. What I'm trying to make sure is that as we talk about the different options, that we do not end up increasing concentrations of poverty at the other 4 schools as a result of whatever decision that we make moving forward. So we've been trying to have some way that we don't make things worse. And I think that's the part from a demographic standpoint, we look at the different options that I know I was looking at, I guess it was 6 weeks ago, and we were looking at it before and just looking at the map, and I was just trying to play around with numbers, looking at some of the options that they had here that we did not unintentionally increase, let's say make Booker T, for example, more concentrated, or make Norview more concentrated where it is above and beyond what the district average is. So that's the piece I think we have to be sensitive to. And I just remember as Dr. Boone, as you came in and we were having the discussions around, Southside STEM Academy, that still sticks with me. So I think we have to make sure that we are very much intentional, and then I think the program will sell itself in terms of options. I don't think any of us are trying to control who's going to be attracted to it, but we want to make sure that as a whole we're not making things worse, and that is all tied to academic outcomes and research. It's not
Right.
It's not about social engineering. It's about educational outcomes. All of this is about academic outcomes. Dr. Robinson.
Well, that's why it's absolutely critical that we make Southside STEM Academy an outstanding school, as well as build up what's at Booker T with what has been brought before us, to make it attractive for people to want to make the trek to go to that school.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that, but I don't. As we look at our zones, even as we look at the maps that we have before us, these zones and maps, some of them go back 40 years. Things change. So the idea that we can create the magnet and they will come, I think in some respects that's true, but a lot of the research shows that what you zone also has significant impact. So to the extent that we can be excellent in both areas, I think that should be our goal.
Well, and I think to your earlier point, Dr. Boone, one of the natural forces will be just simply the capacity of our 4 remaining schools. So, you know, that's a force that we can't control or expand upon. I mean, these walls don't expand and contract. They are what they are for now.
And the fact that we have high-quality specialty programs
Absolutely.
within those schools also.
Exactly, right.
So, yeah, there's a lot of possibility there.
But I think this is just a great movement towards the CTE school that we've been talking about for absolutely way too long. It's actually going to come to fruition. And I really give a lot of credit to the division for moving it forward. And we're talking about some things that are tangible that we haven't been able to before. So I really applaud you, and I look forward to seeing it all play out, really.
So just to reconnect from where we started, especially in light of where we are today as a result of what the weather has impacted, I just want to re-emphasize for us as a board getting straight on trying to get this mini retreat scheduled. Because I think we are going to have to be the ones to make sure that we can provide a clear framework to the division to go off and do the things that we want them to implement. And so we can't just keep talking about it.
No, but
So
if
we
you're,
need to
if you're
bite
thinking
that
our mini
bullet.
retreat on the 26th is needed before the vote on the 21st, then we have to meet before the
No,
21st.
no. The 21st, the vote on the 21st right now would just be centered around the St. Helena pathway. What Dr. Boone had said earlier in terms of the rest of the bigger picture, that was,
No.
CTE.
Has
we
to be
need-
on the
yeah,
21st also.
On the 21st.
which 21st
Yeah, but
y'all
we're talking about
February-
the
February-
Okay, I was talking
January
about, okay, I'm talking about
24th.
January. I'm sorry.
January
Okay,
26th
all right.
is what she's
So,
talking about.
Dr. Boone and I are on the same page. We're
Okay.
saying February 21st is vote
Yes.
on CTE, which means, are you saying that we need the 26th programmatic specialty program discussion even before that?
Well,
January
I'm
26th.
saying
Well-
it's an additional opportunity.
so we can, let's put a month with the dates. I think we can
That's what's
confuse.
throwing me, yeah.
Because next week is the second meeting in January. At what we're calling the mini retreat, either the 26th
Of January.
of January or the 2nd of February,
Right.
we can include this as part of our discussion point around specialty programs, specialty schools, and as a result, can begin to move for readiness for that February, second meeting in February action.
Okay.
So
That makes sense.
that's the goal.
Okay.
And I'm sorry if I confused. So
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
the mini retreat and the February work session gives us an opportunity to be prepared for the February 21st.
Correct.
Right.
I'm with you.
But my point was, we have to make sure as a board that we can agree whether it's going to be February 22nd or January 22nd or February 2nd.
January 26th.
Whatever, y'all know what I mean.
January 26th or February 2nd is for the mini retreat. We just need to confirm those dates. Does
Do
that
the
help?
second, I
Ms.
can't
Doyle
do the
asked me
24th.
before the meeting started how I was doing. I told her all this snow has me disoriented. So, been shoveling too much.
Scheduled training.
Anyway, you all know what I mean. Janelle, Ms. Banks will be reaching out to us. We need to drill down and try to make whatever adjustments we can so that we can get this work done and so we can get out the way and allow the administration to do what they need to do. Anything else on this for now?
On this in particular, CTE.
Or the educational
On the
planning.
educational planning.
So what about the Fairlawn Poplar Hall? And while I know Lake Taylor Middle will require work on the building to accommodate a K to 8, what's the timing on us making that recommendation / vote so you can move forward on that?
You will recall, that was one of the two preliminary recommendations that we asked you to put on hold. And we would get through this first work initially, because there was some more work we needed to do on both of those, and we would come back later this spring and begin to talk about the other two options, which represents the boundaries for Camp Allen, Sewell's Point, and then what our recommendation will be around the Fairlawn Poplar Halls, Lake Taylor Middle utilization.
Okay. I just don't want to lose sight of those two, so I wanted
Oh,
to
no,
kind of
we.
surface them again.
That's our work that's ongoing. We haven't forgotten. No. We still had, because we wouldn't be able to affect either one of those for the fall of 18.
Right.
We'd be looking in the fall of 19. So that's why the thinking was when we asked to pull those back. One, we need to do some more work on the demographics, the enrollment pieces for Camp Allen and Sewell's. And then we can start it in the spring and hopefully finalize it in the fall and be ready for the fall of 19 then for that to open.
Yeah, and I think as a board, if we can prepare even to vote late spring, even if that's a change that happens in 1920 and not in 1819, then I think we should move as a board on those and not delay and wait.
Well, our buffet runneth over, but I hear you.
All right.
It would be better for the division if we could.
I understand.
Yeah.
Our buffet still runneth over.
I understand.
And just, and we'll come back to this a little bit later, but, you know, just keep in mind, we also, in addition to the things we talked about already, you know, working through our budget process. So these next 3 to 4 months are going to be our usual months. So,
Sprints.
yeah, just
You're on fire.
remind us of that, and hopefully the weather will hold off. So with that, let's move forward to school board policy review, and before we end the meeting, if there's anything else that needs to come back under matters of the board, we can do that. So Dr. Boone, we have, looks like a few items under school board policy review.
Yes, and I'm looking at Dr. Burson because I believe Reverend Hayward was supposed to lead our discussion on this. So, and I see Mr. Cloud has joined us for, and I believe, is Dr. Robinson doing a piece?
Well, I'm here, so.
Okay,
I'm
Ms.
on-
Basine,
yeah,
if you
yeah.
want to.
All right, I didn't know, okay, so Ms.
Yeah,
Basine, you like to lead us through this?
So as you see, we have a couple of policies here. Some, you know, are, I don't know if the administration wants to talk about these, but we have the charter school policy update, which reflects the amendment to the code, and the Norfolk City Board Charter School Application Addendum. And I don't know if Mr. Cloud, is there anything specific that you want to highlight about those two, or?
Well, I'll just say that this brings the charter school policy regulation application up to date. With obtaining certain things that it's mostly just being brought up to date.
Right, okay. Are there any questions about the charter school policies?
Looking at here it is.
And then there have been some updates to the parent and family engagement policy, which is the Title I policy. And then, were there any questions related to that?
So just refresh us. So we know we were having conversations around the family engagement piece. You mentioned this is tied to the Title I component. So the changes that are here, they're a combination of recommendations from VSBA and the committee, or are these predominantly just recommendations that we received from VSBA?
These, for this particular policy, is specific to VSBA because
Okay.
Title I requires certain language to be in the policy. So this particular one is a reflection of what VSBA.
So it's mostly driven by, I guess, legalese or
Yes.
requirements from the federal government or from the state as
Right.
far as the policy is concerned?
Right.
Okay.
And so we have previously approved it, but these just reflect current updates to
Okay.
that.
Did it change the intent of the earlier votes?
It did not change the intent of
Okay.
it earlier, yeah. And then we, of course, you know, as we've talked about, this board has talked about our own family engagement policy that is still, outside of the Title I policy. So we have that, which is meant for all schools, all, what our family engagement policy is. But we talked about, as a result of that, approving that policy and looking at a parent-student compact and whether a policy was necessary around that. And after a lot of discussion and review, the policy committee felt that our parent, the student conduct, the student code of conduct, the handbook, had clearly outlined responsibilities for parents, students, and the school division. And so what we did is that the page that is already being signed was to add language in there that would reflect back on those sections in the handbook, because we felt that it had thoroughly covered, what the student, parent, and school responsibilities are.
So what's the hook for enforcement?
Well, the hook for enforcement is, that is an administration issue that we hope that every school, just as they do currently, they have to sign, the student and the parent has to sign the form. And so they must return the form back to the school. So, however the administration ensures that those forms are returned, I would assume would continue. I don't know.
I was going to say also the hook is in the conversations that principals and school personnel have when we discuss the handbook at PTA meetings or opening school meetings. It's that reinforcement of the partnership that we want with parents and expectations that the board has for parents to partner with us in their child's education. So that's the manner in which we see that hook for that.
Yeah.
The language will be there, and sometimes it will be that chance we can remind parents, but you signed this.
Right.
You said you were with us on certain things. So.
Yeah, and from the enforcement side, enforce what, for example?
Well, just make sure that what's in the policy is actually acted upon by the child, the parent, the family.
Oh, okay.
Well,
Okay.
and that goes back to the earlier discussions we had on that.
Yes.
There's not a lot we can do in terms of the family adult adherence to that. We know certainly sometimes in private schools, that can be a point of dismissal from the private school or exiting a private school or a charter school. We don't necessarily have that authority in public schools. And
Right.
so we're going to use it as that positive partnership aspect versus
Okay,
the carrot versus the hammer type.
right. Okay, thank you.
Well, I found it interesting when we were at St. Helena up on the gymatorium wall, there was a poster of expectations from the students, and number 5, we are responsible for what we say and do. Now, I'd probably put that number 1, but it was nice to see that, and I applaud Principal Robinson, no relation, but for that effort, because I think that's even with the Title I policy, the way it's written is it outlines what the school division's responsible to create the parent involvement. I don't think we spend enough time really in trying to bring the parent into the engagement process. I think we try to, but I think we emphasize that most because I've spent my entire adult life learning about leadership and coaching and success, and success comes through you, not to you. So if we can ingrain that concept in our students, I think we'd be better successful.
Yeah. I think a lot of that still goes back to the culture and the climate, the expectations that are set. I mean, as you mentioned, St. Helena, I mean, all of our schools really, they have, expectations. I think what we're trying to figure out as a board, how do we support the building administrators? How do we support the teachers? How do we hear it in the climate surveys from staff. We hear it from parents that come from the microphone that how important it is that the learning environment is a learning environment. And so how do we provide whatever supports we can, resources, incentives, whatever it may be, so that learning environment and that culture there and the high expectations that we want permeates not only on the division side, but also provides supports in the home and in the community. And so I think a lot of the attention that we've given to it, the compact or the family engagement policy just reinforces that and provides some different supports, but it's almost like, I wish I could make people shovel the snow in front of their house. In some ways, the folks that come out in the block and 75% of the sidewalk is shoveled, it's interesting how others will pitch in. But if the majority of the block doesn't come out and do that, then that sets that tone and that culture. So I think this is a way for us as a board, through our continuing efforts around community and family engagement, to set the tone from where we are, that we are, committed to this work as is outlined in our, goals and aspirations and priorities that we've set forward. So I'm glad the committee has done that work, and we need to continue to drill down and continue to have our discussions on how we can be supportive. And Dr. Boone, I think that's important for us to continue to communicate. I know the partnerships that you have with the teachers associations, all of us go out and, try to make ourselves available to the community. We've talked about, mentoring and volunteers, but just having that spirit that, Norfolk Public Schools is a place where we're going to value learning in the schools and at home, and it's a shared responsibility, as we've talked about. We just have to continue to reinforce that.
Right. And I think we've strengthened that too, that aspect of it, in our family engagement policy. So that, in conjunction with, greater emphasis in the handbook, which we have, and the other change has been the change in the title, which we've changed it to Standards of Student Conduct and Parent and Guardian Responsibilities Card, so that in the title, it clearly indicates that we are not just talking about the student code of conduct, we're talking about the parent's responsibilities. So you can quick pull that up and say, look, you signed this. So that's that. So everybody, we're comfortable with where we are there, right? Okay. And then last, we have a couple items for discussion. One is policy CBCA, which is the disclosure statement required of the superintendent. It's just the policy updated to reflect the amendment in the code. If there is discussion on that, I don't know if there's anything specific you want to add, Mr. Cloud.
Well, I was going to review it for the board.
Okay.
I'm not sure that the board's familiar with the nature of the policy. Should I do that now, Rose?
Yeah, if you like to. I mean, we see the language in front of us, but please.
Well, the Virginia School Board Association has this as an optional policy. And what it is, as you all know, the Virginia Conflict of Interest Act requires school board members and council members, as a condition of taking your position, to file annually a statement of economic interest. And then you have to file a new one every year. You probably just got yours in the past few days, or you will get it shortly if you haven't.
Right.
The statute allows, but does not require, councils and school boards to in turn require other people under their control to file these statements. The members of boards that you fill, the superintendent in this instance, and really any employee that you felt it was, because of the nature of the position, you felt it was necessary, you could require to file such the same sort of statement that you all file. However, you're not. This is a choice that the school board has and council members have in terms of requiring it. I can tell you the Norfolk City Council does not require anyone who isn't already required by state law to file these statements. So, for example, the city manager doesn't file such a statement. I checked around to see what other school divisions did in the Hampton Roads area, and none of them required except Portsmouth. Portsmouth has passed this optional policy. And I talked to the VSBA attorney to get a sense, in her unscientific survey, her sense was most school boards do not require this. It is optional. It's there before you. Somehow, and I'm not sure how it happened, because I don't recall it being discussed before, but the policy was passed in May of this year for the first time. And if the board wants to keep it, it needs to be revised because the statute has been revised somewhat. What really is before the board whether to go forward, continue with this policy, update it, and require the superintendent to file a statement of economic interest every year, or simply repeal it. It's not something, obviously, that the administration really can take a position on because it directly impacts the administration. I can tell you, as your attorney, I don't see the necessity for it unless there are board members that are particularly, feel particularly strong about it, that they would like to see such statements filed. And as I say, it does not appear to be the rule. So it's before the board for consideration, not to do anything tonight, but I wanted to try to bring out the issues for you.
Anyone have any initial thoughts on it at this point? Ms. Doyle?
So why did we vote on it in favor of it in May, and yet now we're learning from you, Jack, that it's not common practice?
Well, I haven't been able to find that out. As far as I know, it was not discussed, and in talking with other members of the policy committee, they have no recall of it being discussed. Frankly, it seems to have been passed as part of a passage of a large number of policies, and it just slipped through the cracks, frankly.
Yeah, it's there in May. We voted on it.
Well, what I was going to say, are we sure it's not a typo?
No, Janelle has confirmed
Okay.
that it was passed in May.
Yeah,
Yeah, I just went back to it. It's there. But we voted in favor of it.
Yeah, because, so we need to make a determination, because I agree with Attorney Cloud. I don't recall us having this discussion as we normally would do at a work session, so it may have been caught up in the bundle on the agenda, so. But as of right now, is there any sense of any need for us to have it at this time? Any from the committee? Any?
No.
So let's.
So what does that mean?
Well, what Attorney Clark was saying is that we would, if we keep the policy, then we need to update it.
Right.
Or we need to repeal the policy. And that's why I was going to ask, that in terms of what currently exists, is there a time frame for us to do either, as far as the way the current statutes are written? In other words, do we need to approve or repeal at the next business meeting? That's what I'm asking.
Yes, I think so, because if you do nothing, it stays on the books, and although it's not exactly in conformance with the current statute, it still carries within it the requirement that, if it's allowed to stand, that on February 1st, the superintendent would have to file the same forms that you all have to file on February 1st.
Well, why don't we do this then, because we don't have the full board here, but on the current agenda, we have the memo that describes it, and so if we can provide an update, basically take the information that Attorney Cloud has shared with us today, put it in a memo, get it out to the board, have it on the discussion agenda at the business meeting, and then that'll give us time to prepare and to come to the meeting next week to determine, what our sense is as far as not repeal or replace, but repeal or approve, and we can reach out to each other with that memo and I'll get a sense of where we are as a board.
So I just looked back at the work session prior to the vote of the business meeting, and this was policy updated to reflect amendment of Virginia Code. So it looked like we voted on it in favor because it was an update already of something in the
right.
code. So
But it was an
didn't
update
require-
of an optional.
Yeah, see, I
Policy.
think that's where
It's not required by the
Yeah.
code, it's a choice that a school board can
yeah,
make.
it sounds like to me it got added in as
Yeah.
though it was a requirement, when at the time
Exactly.
it was actually optional.
Right,
Yeah.
okay.
So you all, I'm
Since
sorry.
since we're on the discussion, what is the purpose of having a disclosure statement?
For
For
Us?
us?
Well, I mean, the whole discussion that's been going around public official and ethics, that's where ours is being driven. And, you know, as school board members, while we don't have exposure to, in ways that General Assembly members and governors and other folks have, but let's say, for example, we are looking at a contractor to build schools. And so if school board members have stock in a company that's going to build schools, you know, we have responsibilities to recuse ourselves from certain things. But in terms of the whole movement around open government, it's just intended so that the citizens know whether or not policymakers and those who are setting policy and elected officials, for us to disclose those types of things, and it becomes available for public inspection as part of open government. I mean, that's where a lot of these disclosure statements have borne, at least from my perspective.
Right.
Yeah. So as you all know, when we fill out ours, that's the main thing. You know, conversation about, you know, have you had anybody pay for a meal for you? You know, we go to conventions. I know all of us are very sensitive about, you know, vendors will come up and say, hey, why don't I go and take you out someplace? So if in those disclosure statements, depending upon certain thresholds, you report those things so people know what we're doing, who we're talking to, who we're receiving dinners or other goodies from, if indeed any of that is occurring. That's my attempt of explanation.
That was my understanding of it. I just wanted to make sure it was all on the same page.
Yeah.
Of the why of the economic interest statement, and then just determine if that should be part of the superintendent's responsibility too.
Right. All right. Anything else on this? Anything else from the committee?
There is nothing else from the committee.
All right, we will proceed on. Next, I just want you to, in terms of going back to this chart that you have with related to the school board's expenditures to date, we know that as part of our work, we're going to prepare a school board budget along with the overall budget of the division. I had just asked Janelle if she would provide for the board where we are in terms of our expenditures to date. So I'm not asking anybody to take any action on anything at this point, but I wanted you to have this as you are considering, and as we will consider, you know, school board priorities, adjustments that we've made. You may recall last year we made adjustments around meals and lodging. You know, we reduced some of that. We made several other reductions, and so I just wanted the board to have in front of it how we are doing against what we approved, how our expenditures are running. Note that some things are going to lag, and as I was going over this with Janelle, you know, we know that there are some things like our memberships with different associations. Their due dates are different. So some of these you'll see that she has provided both in the description column under 2018 expenses, and then a general description what some of these things are, so that you can have additional information. So I just would ask if you all would take some time, look through this. If there's additional information that you like to have or some questions about it, then, you know, send those, so that as we prepare for the school board budget, our commitment was to make sure that we had as much transparent information as possible. And so I want to make sure that folks are comfortable with the information that you're receiving. Any questions on this at this point? All righty. Dr. Boone, anything in general you just want to talk about as far as the overall budget process, what we may be hearing from the General Assembly, from the governor, anything like that?
Actually, next week, during next week's board meeting, can't remember if it's the workshop or it's in the formal session, we will be providing an assessment and analysis of what's included in the governor's budget and how it will impact Norfolk Public Schools directly. So we're working on that process, and that will be part of what you receive. There, one bit of information, the governor's proposed budget for FY19 does not have any salary increases in it for SOQ positions. Salary increases don't show up until FY20, and those are December 1st, I believe, are 2%. So there's nothing in the FY19 budget as it is currently presented that includes any salary increases for SOQ positions. So that's a direct impact. But Ms. Ingram and Ms. Toe will go through and point out specifics of that budget to you. In terms of our timeline, we're the district leadership team, which is also our core budget team. We're working through what's been submitted by the various departments and schools, what that looks like. We're also vetting that now. We have a meeting coming up in a couple of weeks that will allow us to begin to trim some of that, vet some of that, say what survives and what doesn't. We also will be presenting to the board next week the proposed final calendar. Ms. Ingram did part of that, but looking to get a budget to the board as close to March 1st as possible, and with action somewhere around March 21st or somewhere in that range, so that we can get the required information to the city council, which we're required to do by April 1st anyway. So budget is well underway. We don't have an update at this point on the revenue sharing agreement. The NPS team and the city team met a couple of times on that. They worked on, as the city manager shared at the joint meeting, worked on some of the policy assumptions that would be embedded in that, but there's still work that's ongoing, and so don't have that to bring to the board quite yet. So,
Ms. Doyle?
Is it likely we will have that funding formula for this fiscal year?
the goal was to have a resolution before both bodies at some point in February.
Right.
Remains to be seen.
And of course, we can always as we've discussed, if there are resolutions or encouragements that we would like to put forward, that's always something that is within our purview. But Dr. Boone is correct. The goal was that we would have comparable resolutions. We did not, after we had the joint meeting in December, we did not have our leadership team meeting that would have been, I think, the next day. But we are working to get that on the calendar so that we can make sure that we continue to push those discussions.
We're definitely still at the table. Whether or not we can push through a couple of key issues.
Any questions on that? So that's really what we've had in terms of actual reports and discussion points for the work session. Dr. Boone, I don't know if there's anything else that you just wanted to mention, brief, update, anything at all?
Well, I can certainly announce that Norfolk Public Schools will be opening on a 2-hour delay tomorrow.
He's very happy.
So all of this that you saw going on was some heating issues resolved that were lingering. So we got that, and so that allowed us to push that out. So we are opening tomorrow on a 2-hour delay. I will say for the viewing public and the listening public, please encourage all in your family, your neighbors, friends, and everyone else to please exercise extreme caution when driving tomorrow. The good news of having a delay, we will be out of initial rush hour traffic in the morning, but dismissal would still be at that time because there are still a lot of corners with snow mounds on them. There's still some difficult sidewalks and things to traverse, and when students get on and off buses. And so please just think about it as we do in September, the first day of schools. we just ask that you exercise a great deal of caution in driving tomorrow as we work to reopen schools.
Shovel your walks.
And patience.
Lots of patience,
like you-
Lots
yes.
of patience.
Like you
Buses
said-
have been started, and so
Yeah.
we don't have issues with buses that won't be started. We did that after the snow, and so those are ready to go. But there will be some areas that are difficult. We pointed out to the city late this afternoon, a couple of other places, and to see if they could give us some help in those areas to help with navigating, so.
And I would suspect likewise with walking paths, trying to
And
make
walking
sure
paths,
that
that's right.
we can give attention and
Exactly.
support for that.
Help our babies get to and from school safely, and our staff. And so we're very appreciative. As I said, I began today talking about how appreciative I was of the trades and facilities staff and the custodians, the building supervisors, the general custodians. And I want to give a huge shout out to our bus drivers who have an awesome responsibility each and every day. And so we thank them for picking up our babies tomorrow morning and driving safely, and know that we're supporting them and get our babies to and from school safely tomorrow. And we want our staff to also be safe tomorrow. So this will be the first night in over a week that we won't have below freezing temperatures. So the 2-hour delay is designed to be able to navigate still streets that have some snow built up on them, where today's melting may not have gotten them that much. Today's delay for our 12-month personnel and essential personnel is because we had freezing overnight and we had some more black ice and those things. So wanted people to be able to navigate safely. So that's my announcement for today.
Just one more. I sent an email to everybody. It appears that the 23rd is the best day for the General Assembly Day,
That's the Tuesday.
the Tuesday.
The Tuesday.
So please let me know if you all can do it. Brad said that might be a good day for him. So just let me know so that the folks at,
Advantis.
yes, Advantis
Yes,
can
right.
set up the appointments for their local delegation and others who would be of open mind to our legislative proposals.
Yeah, we'll need to make sure that we have a well-thought-out plan on how we see all those people,
Yeah.
because they're going to be in different buildings.
Yeah, I know. It'll be very different this year.
That's going to be,
Yeah.
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 We have to divide and conquer.
Yeah. So I'll probably email them tomorrow anyway and just say, hey, what's the plan? Who do you need to go where? And then fill in the holes. But let me know if you can even be there.
Yeah, I know I'll be up there. Just before we adjourn, is that anything else as far as just a reminder, our plan is for us to we're gonna have this business meeting next week, weather permitting. As I mentioned, we need to get back on schedule both in, what'd I
Say
say?
weather permitting.
Yeah.
We're done.
Yeah.
The eternal optimist.
Sorry.
I just got, I'm giving it to
I was just talking
Got
about
it.
the school board meeting. I didn't say anything about schools being open, so schools will be open. I'm just talking about school board meeting. So we're planning to have our business meeting next week. So I just wanted to put out there again that if there are anything as far as additional information that anyone needs, if you can try to get that in tomorrow, maybe by mid-Friday, so that we can give the administration, if we need anything additional from them, an opportunity to prepare it and have it available for us in time for the meeting. So with that, if there's nothing else, anyone?
Monday is a school holiday, and so schools and offices are closed on Monday for Dr. Martin Luther King holiday.
Oh, sorry, right, school is out Monday. Thanks for
I
the
know.
reminder, yes. Ms. Basine, were you getting ready?
I'll refrain.
Okay. All right, let's go home. Meeting
Be
adjourned.
safe going home.